Okay, so this is going to be the second installment in a SharePoint admin series on site templates. So we're going to call this site templates part 2. So if you look at the screen here, here in the first tab, I have the project template, and this is the thing we want to replicate, right? And in the previous video, we executed our PowerShell script. We kind of went through PnP provisioning, the architecture, and the concept and the architectural design behind it, and how do you execute the PowerShell to create this. And if you compare the two, you will notice that for the most part, I got, the navigation, I actually have too much in the navigation. My center screen or my main home page does not reflect to be one-to-one. And the whole purpose of this is to replicate your template site exactly in your new destination site. And the big piece that we were missing, so we got the provisioning, we talked about the XML, and then we talked about the 2 file types and so on and so forth. We covered a lot of information, but at the end of the day, we were still a bit short on our goal to replicate the site one for one. Okay, so the big piece that was missing was the config file. So let's talk about the config file in the whiteboard very quickly, and then we're going to jump in with both feet to unpack or decode the config file and why it's important. Now, if you look at this whiteboard, let's just say this is our project template site. So this is the original, and this is the new destination site, right? This is where we're going to. And basically what we want is this site to mimic this site. And when you two things that come up. One, you have to manually create the site. So far, we can't get past that, but there are some options to where you can actually have the PnP provisioning script actually create the site, then apply the template, which is magical. But we'll talk through that. We'll grow into that scenario. Secondly, when you create the site, you have to make sure that the core is the same. So if your base site is based off a communication site template, then this should be a communication site template. If this is Teams, this should be Teams. And we're only dealing with modern. Does it support, does the PnP provisioning support classic? Absolutely, but that's beyond the scope of this video because we're really on the trending or the evergreen path based on the Microsoft strategy. Now, when we look at this, we have two, this may be a little bit repeat, but we have two PnP scripts, right? So we have an extract. So this replication is done in 2 steps. We have an extract, and then we have an apply, right? So the extract, let me erase this because that's actually misleading. The extract does nothing with the destination site. Actually, you can do the extract without even having a new site created, right? So with the extract, what it's going to do is produce that XML file. If you decide to go that file type, or you can do PnP provisioning if you decide to do that file type. But then that just lives on a file share. And then the apply picks up this XML file and apply that to your new site. So when you do the apply, you absolutely need to have the destination or the new site readily available, provisioned, and ready to rock and roll. So the config file that we're going to talk through is actually only applies to the extract step, right? Now, this is important, and I'm going to just label these step 2, step 1, step 2, so we know which step is done before the other. Right. So because this config file it only applies to the extract step, you can actually generate multiple XMLs that represent different configuration settings. And why would you? What's the scenario where you would run into that? One scenario would be, imagine this: you provision this site for the first time. So you need one-to-one. So this is a project site. So you're going to provision that project site one-to-one, and maybe this XML is the full provisioning, meaning that. And we're going to get to that. We're going to build a full provisioning config file, right? And meaning that you're going to have a project site, give it to your project managers, and they're going to start using it. The second scenario could be, okay, what if the PMO came back, the project management office came back and said, you know what, for every project site, we need to have an issue tracker, and the issue tracker needs to follow this schema. So now we need to apply that for all of the 50 or plus project sites that are already provisioned. Well, that's a different config because we don't want to apply this provisioning, the XML provisioning, as if these guys are brand new. If they've been used, they're already in use, and these projects are already in flight. So in that scenario, we may create a config2 that's going to be very selective on what it wants to apply from the template. And when you do that config2, you're actually going to, in turn, create a second or a separate XML file. And then, so when you go to apply to, the apply step is going to look for, one of the inputs is, one, what site do I want to apply this to? And two, which XML file should I use? So again, understanding that this config file only applies to the extract, and you may have different scenarios where you have one configuration setting for full provisioning, and then another configuration setting for updates or delta provisioning, and then you're going to have the XML files to reflect that. Okay, let's jump into the config. Now, I want to walk you through a very vanilla, like I don't want to show you a config and then have you copy and paste and stuff like that. I actually want to walk you through building a config file from scratch. I'm not going to go through all the details of it, but I think it's important that we build it from scratch, because beyond this video, you're going to be new features and capabilities, new configuration settings that you want to apply. And I don't want to pigeonhole or handicap you in the sense that, well, I only know this, and Deshaun really didn't walk through how we got this setting or this profile in the config, and now I'm kind of stuck. But if I give you the tools and show you how to build it from scratch, well beyond in the future, when there's new features and capabilities, you will be able to assume that, because you have a pattern or practice on how to do this. So the first thing we have to do is find the config file. So let me do this, or really find the schema for the config file. Do a Google search on PnP provisioning, right? And that should drop you into learn.microsoft. And basically all we want is this magic JSON script here. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna hit copy here, and I'm gonna go to my directory where I'm actually storing all of my templates. So let me do this. I got some config files in play. I'm gonna move these out of the way. That's not how you spell archive, by the way. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is, now that I got my old ones out of the way, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm just using config.json, right? So I'm gonna create a JSON file, and then I'm gonna open this in Visual Studio Code. And remember, I copied that schema, I copied that blob off, this is me playing. All right, so I have that config, actually, let me restart. Sorry, let me do this over. I had a file open in Visual Studio Code because I prepped for these videos, and that was residue of that preparation. Okay, so now I have a config.json file. I'm gonna do a Control V, and this is gonna be the exact same thing that we received from that learn.microsoft page. I'm gonna delete everything except for the schema, right? I'm okay leaving this comma in there because we're gonna add new things to this. Now, this is where things is going to get very dry, and it's going to seem like paint is drying on, like we're watching paint dry on the wall. So I'm going to hold down the control key and click on that URL, and that's going to drop me to the schema. This is a boring read, but a necessary read, right? This is going to, because what you're going to do is go through this schema and understand all of the switches and capabilities that you have within the schema. The reason why I opened the config.json file in Visual Studio is that it's going to give me IntelliSense based off of the schema, and help me build this config file, and we're going to build this together. Now, the homework assignment is going to be to go through and understand, or at least just read the description that says, okay, here's a tenant switch. And these are the properties for the tenant switch. So I have a required setting for site URLs. So basically, it's looking for site URLs. What exactly does this do? So always read in the description. It took me a minute. I'm not big on schemas, like XML schemas and JSON schemas, but basically what this is doing is it's listing out not necessarily an example XML file or an example JSON file, but rather these are the properties available to you as you build your JSON file. And here's the metadata of those properties, or the background information or description for each property, and what you can and cannot do. And this is what those descriptions are defining. So you need to go through this and understand, just be familiar of what the options are. You don't necessarily have to build it, but be familiar of what your options are. So that way, when you go into your site provisioning settings or your site provisioning, your site template scenarios, hopefully these will kind of ring bells in the back of your head of what you can and cannot do, and how, what switch you need in order to replicate a certain file, list, library, or even site setting, logos, navigation, Okay. All right. So let's look at. So you're going to explore that. So let's see if we can get both of these in the window. Now, the easiest way to do this, and again, this is why Visual Studio is super important, is that I have this comma here under Schema, which you need. And then I'm going to just hit the space bar. I'm holding down the control key and hit the space bar. And this is going to allow me to see all my different options. Now, again, I don't know, just by looking at these, I can probably guess what they should and should not be doing. But the schema is going to help you define that. So let's just look at the top. And I know exactly like what combination I need for full provisioning. So we're going to walk through that. Content types, we don't need, right? By default, it's going to copy all content types, and it says that in the schema. So if you search on, if you go down to like content types, now this is a little confusing, right? Because the indentation is not that great. So I think this is the first level. So tenant is 1, teams is 1, pages is 1. Okay, here's content types. So when you get to content types, it says define all the content types to extract, and additional properties, false, and then description, if set, only the content types in this group will be included. Now, this is really a scenario where you just say, okay, for content types, I don't want all of them. I only want this set. And then you define that. In our case, we want all the content types from the project site. So we're not going to use that. And that's the example of how you use that. And then the other one is handlers. I was super duper confused with the handlers, right? And let's just go back to the snippet that we grabbed. Because I saw this, I was like, oh man, I need this handler, right? I need to define what I need and what I don't need in XYZ, and I need to list all these out. This was a huge mistake, and it's really misleading from this particular blog article. If you do not specify any handlers, it's going to copy all the settings and capabilities. The only time that you come in here and you specify handlers is when you need to cherry pick and say, nope, don't bring over all pages. So let me omit that. I really just want lists and web settings. I'm going to omit everything else. So my config files back in the day when I was first doing this, I was listing out all my different handlers, and then because I didn't list something, it would get missed, and I thought provisioning just wouldn't handle that, So I say all that to say, do not specify any handlers for full provisioning. Now, when you do the delta provisioning, this will probably be very critical, right? Because in our scenario where, the PMO came back and said, we only want, we want to issue this new issues list, right? And every project management site should have this issue list, new ones and existing, right? So in that scenario, my handler is like, I only want lists, and then underneath this, I'm going to define what to do with these particular lists. I don't want you to bring over web settings. I don't want you to bring over pages. I don't want you to bring over navigation changes, I'm only dealing with lists. That's when the handlers come in. So for full provisioning, we're going to leave that blank. So we're not going to touch that. Now lists, we did have gaps. So let's go ahead and define, actually let's skip lists. Let's come back to that one because that one's a little bit more complex. Let's go navigation. So I do need navigation. What was the issue with the navigation? If you remember, let's just familiarize ourselves with what happened in the previous video. In the previous video, we got this navigation. I hate this Teams pop-up. It's probably one of the most annoying things ever. All right, so here in the navigation, what had happened was it brought over way too many links. No. It overlaid my project links. Sorry, I had too many tabs open. I'm running into a collision here. Okay, so if you look at the project site, I have home, notebook, You can see that here. And then I compare that to the new site that was created. What happened was it overlaid my template navigation on top of the out of the box navigation, and that's not what we want. We want the navigation to look exactly like the template site. So here I'm going to bring in navigation and then do a control, and it says remove existing nodes. I actually need to set that to yes. That was the setting that was missing. So basically what this is going to do, and again, this is in that schema description once you read up on navigation, it's going to say at my destination site, wipe the navigation set up and default links clean. Now apply everything that's in the template, and that was missing. All right, so let me hit a comma here, new line, control spacebar. And multilingual doesn't apply for us. Pages, yes. Remember what happened with pages. So this is the site we created in the old video with no config file, right? Let me just recap that just in case you didn't see the previous video, which you should watch anyway. But we didn't do any config file, and this is what happened by default. So by default, if I go to site contents and look at site pages, the site pages library only have the default home.aspx. But if I look under site contents and site pages under my template site, under the site pages library, I actually have 4 pages that did not come over. So now I want to make sure pages are accounted for, hit the space bar, and it's going to say exclude author information and include all client-side pages. I don't necessarily need to exclude author information, but I do need to include all client-side pages. And basically, any site page that you see in the site pages library on my template site, bring all those pages over in my new destination site. All right, so let's keep going here. All right, so here, control. So persist asset files. Again, super important. We want to go ahead and set this to true. What does that mean exactly? Persist asset files means that here's my project template site. In the asset file, I have 17 files there. If I look at the new out of the box, look in asset file, I only had 2 files here. And we know that the site assets library is critical because when you're creating news articles or when you're using images in headers and your news articles, so on and so forth, those images are actually stored in the site assets library, and they have a naming convention on how SharePoint does that out of the box. We want to persist that, right? Because we don't want to be in a scenario where we create events, and that's the other thing. The images you use in events, even images you use in client-side pages, in news posts, all of those are referenced and stored in site assets library behind the scenes. And if you don't bring this over and you include site pages, what's going to happen is you're going to get the page, but then you're going to have broken images on that particular page. So if we persist the site assets library, that's going to prevent that from happening. All right, so let's keep going. Publishing, that doesn't apply to us. Again, there's 3 scenarios the provisioning framework works with. It works with classic SharePoint sites. It works with tenant level provisioning, meaning that tenant level provisioning, and yeah, let's do that in the next video. Tenant level provisioning, let's say for example, we create client portals, right? Let's switch over to the white. Let me just pause right here real quick. Sorry, I know I context switch a lot and I try to be better at this, but usually when an idea comes up, it makes sense to just pause. Tenant level provisioning, 2 things needs to happen here. One, and actually, we're going to do this together because I never use tenant level provisioning in the provisioning engine. This is something that I just read up on, but never used it in practice. So we're going to learn together in the next video. But basically, imagine that we create client portals and we create a template for a client portal. And every time we onboard a new client, their portal consists of a hub that represents the client portal. Then you have, let's say, 4 site collections within that client portal. So you have a hub to represent the portal for the client. And then within there, you're going to have 4 site collections. And those 4 site collections are going to model different things, right? So the PnP provisioning should, based on what I'm reading and based on the concept that I'm understanding behind it, is that you can provision this entire thing based off a template, and it would do not only provision the hub and configure that, but provision all the other site collections for that, and then associate that to that particular hub. I don't know about naming conventions and stuff like that, but this is something that we will grow into. So that's going to be that. So when I go back to this guy, So for search settings, I think we're going to use out of the box. Site footer, we don't have any navigation in our footer, so we don't need to bring that over. Site security, we're just doing everything that's out of the box. Taxonomy, there's nothing there we're doing there. Tenant level, we just talked through that. Version, there's nothing there. So I think navigation was our big issue. Pages was a big issue because they never came over. And site assets was a big issue because it never came over. Now, the one thing we did skip are the lists, right? So here we're going to bring in the list. And why do you need to call this out separately? By default, what end up happening, if you look at site content, no, okay, so I changed some things since the last video only to make this particular point that much more important, or or to amplify the point that I'm trying to make. If you look at the issue, so I have an issue tracker, I have a team calendar, part of this project site. By default, these will not get provisioned. So I need to, actually I don't know, but what we're going to specify is that if you have items in here, like say for example, you have a sample tracker, or more importantly, yeah, a sample tracker, or you do a sample calendar entry just to kind of get the team or the project manager familiar with how you use this and the type of information you're supposed to store. That's what this switch is going to be. I don't know if you necessarily need to switch just to get the list and library schemas over. I think it will do that by default. The other thing that this configuration would do is bring over document libraries. So let's, documents inside of a document library. So let's do this. Let's upload some fake files. I think I have some. I usually get fake files from the. Oh yeah, here we go. Let's upload these PDFs, right? And right. So let's just say that you probably have some starter. I wouldn't put templates here. Only because I think you want more control over templates, right? So I would probably reference templates as a separate document library, like a highlighted content web part or something like that. But let's just say that, you got some core documents that every site should have as a starting point, and that's going to be within our project documents. Now, the document library, I don't know if the document library get moved because it's out of the box. It may or may not be. I don't know. But the files in the library, the same with the list items in the list, will not be moved by default. So this other configuration setting is needed. So here in the list, it's looking for an object, and then it's asking, do you want to include hidden lists? We don't have any hidden lists in our scenario, but do you want to include? But do you want to specify attributes for other lists? And the answer here is going to be true. So for these lists, it's looking for another object. I know this notation is weird. And then, okay, so now when I'm doing, every time you hear that click, I'm just holding down the control key and hitting the space bar. So here it says include items. And this is true. We want to do that. And then I do a comma, and then I hit control and then space bar again. And then it's going to ask, do I need a key column? Do I need to specify that? Again, the description of what each one of these mean, you have to look at the schema. I know just by practice that I don't need this. I don't need a query. I don't need to remove existing content types. I don't need to skip empty fields. And then the title is the name of the list that I want to bring items in. So this is going to be documents. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Alt key and then hit the letter F, right? So that's going to kind of get us in a nice format. And I need this because what I have here is I'm going to repeat this for each. I should know this, but I don't. I'm going to repeat this for every list and or library I need to bring over where I want to include the files. And I think this is the only one. I only need to do that for the ones I need to include. We're going to test this out. If other libraries and lists do not come because I'm specifying lists, then that's going to be a problem. I think I need to include this. Let's just assume you do. We'll test it out. Let's assume we don't. And then based on our test results, we'll update this. All right, so which libraries, list and libraries did I custom create? The ones that are out of the box, we don't need to bring over. The ones we custom created, we need to bring over. So I have issue tracker and I have team calendar. And you got to get the spelling correct. So the best way to do this, instead of typing it blindly and hoping that you got your, and I don't know if it's case sensitive or not, right? So to remove that possibility of an error, I'm going to just copy the name exactly, right? So I'm going to just go here, and now let's go get the other one. And I want to bring in issue tracker, team calendar, not events. It's not that I don't want to bring it in. I just don't have to include any items for that one. Actually, sorry. I'm going to leave this mistake in the video. Sorry about that. Actually, if the theory is that these are going to bring over all lists and libraries, and the only thing I need to specify here is those lists and or libraries where I need to specify include the items or include files in the case of libraries, I'm gonna leave the other ones off. If we run this and we do not get the calendar list and we do not get the issue tracker list, then we will update this file. All right. But for right now, we are golden. Right. So what started to be a little bit intimidating, we were able to walk through and build this up from scratch, right, outside of specifying the schema. We talked through handlers, and I think handlers is a really, really good call out, right? Because through those examples, the only thing you saw were the handlers, and you start to build you use that as a foundation to start building your config file up from that, and really start chasing your tail because you're telling the provisioning engine to ignore other handlers and only use the ones that you specify. And in most scenarios, that's not the case. Right, so that's a bit misleading when you start to Google search this config file. All right, so no handlers. We got information on navigation, information on pages. We're persisting the asset file because we want our images and all that stuff to come over. We don't want broken images when we bring in articles. And then here, the biggest question mark is for lists. And again, this list represents both lists and libraries. Should we include everything or only the ones that we have to include the items inside of it? We'll find out here shortly. All right, so now that that's saved, we can go ahead and kill that. Let's go to, again, our extract. Again, this only applies to our extract. So let's go ahead and put this in PowerShell. And now what we want to do is specify the path to that config file, right? And make sure we spell it correctly, config.js. And then I just want to double check this path, put my extra whack in there. All right, the site that gets provision, I'm using the PnP extension, and we talked through that in the previous video. So I'm gonna call this Tesla site template projects, and I'm gonna just say full, right? Because we talked through that scenario where we probably want a delta. So I want to call this one full, and I don't want to overwrite the one that was already there. So I think this is a good keyword to use. All right, and this is the URL to my project site, and let's let it rip. So save this, copy this. I always run into this. I need to open this as an admin, run as administrator. And I'm using Amazon Workspace, and there must be an environment config that was implemented that's forcing me to do that. So here I'm gonna do extract, and all of this is actually going to replace this. So Control A, Control V, I'll copy that, save it. Okay, let's let it rip. Okay, so now this is going ahead and start running. And again, this is the extract step. So you notice that we did not create a new site. There's a couple things we can try. We can try to fix that old site that we had. And we're also going to run this against a brand new site. So let's run it against a brand new site first, because again, I still need the answer to that list configuration setting, right? Do I really need to include all of my custom lists and libraries, or only do I need to specify the library I want or list I want to bring the items in? So let's go ahead and switch over here. I'm gonna go into SharePoint admin. Let's go to active sites, go ahead and create a new site. Again, here the decision is going to be what is the base site for your project site or your template site. In my scenario, the base site, because you can't rely on this anymore, right? Usually if I see navigation on the left, instantly it's Teams. If I see navigation, local navigation at the top, instantly it's communication. But now we can change the navigation orientation. Now what I'm looking for to confirm if this was a team-based template or a communication-based template is this notation here, where it has the information about the group. If it has any information about the group, private group, public group, that's a clear indicator that this is a team-based template versus a communication-based template. So I'm gonna go ahead and do team here, and now I'm gonna do project sample 2, make myself the group owner, hit next. No additional members needed, hit finish. Okay, and now I just need to grab this URL and just confirm this came over as expected, very vanilla. All right, so now let's go into our apply. So let me just do open here, get my apply, hit open, and now right here specify the URL. And again, there's no option for configuration when you're doing a apply, right? So if you do configuration, there's no switch, right? There's no configuration switch, which is important, right? Because what that means is that whatever you have in this PNP file or XML file, depending on which file type you're using, is going to be applied. That decision in the configuration file is already made for you, and you're just applying that to this new site. So now what I need to do is go and make sure that we grab the right PNP file. I'll just copy this whole path, go here, paste in that whole path, right? And let it rip. So just save it. Okay, so now this guy is going to be running. Okay, the moment of truth. Are you ready? All right, so let's see what we got here. So let's just go out of here. Okay, so project sample 2, hit a refresh. Very, very close, right? So now if we slide this one down, compare this to our template. Let's go home on our template. Very, very close. Let's scroll down. This is my project site. I see some gaps, right? But you know, for right now, this is the project site. If I look at the top here, my site name did not come over for whatever reason. So here, let me go to gear icon, change the look, go to header, site title visibility. For some odd reason, that was off. So we just turn that on, and then we're good to go. Save that. And that's okay, right? Every now and then you're going to get a scenario where you manually have to flip a switch. I probably need to get the latest and greatest PNP module, provisioning module in PowerShell. But you know, just be okay if you have to do 1 or 2 clicks. Don't let that stop you. Don't spend too many cycles trying to get this perfect, because at the end of the day, that single click, yeah, it's annoying. It probably can be over time. Will probably save you a ton of time. All right. So here, okay, moment of truth. Let's look at our site content section. If you guessed that you needed all your lists that are not out of the box specified, you were right. So I got my document library, which is the only one that we specify, and everything came over as expected. All right, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and patch this up. Let's go to our site template, and the truth of the matter is, in our config file, we need to specify everything, right? So here, I'm gonna just copy here on list. I'm just get how many do we need? So we have documents. We need the form templates come over. Yeah, form templates came over. Interesting. I don't know why that came over and the other ones didn't. Anyway, so we specify. We need form template. No, we need documents, issue tracker, team calendar, and events. So documents, issue tracker, and I will rather be copy and pasting this, but because I have it right in front of me, I'm following spacing, casing, and spelling. Okay, so now we have this cleaned up. We're matching again, only the third parties. I don't need site pages. Site pages is treated differently. Site pages gets provisioned with each and every site, and the only thing I need to do with site pages is say include all client site pages. I don't need to include it here. It's just a different animal, right? But everything else I'm going to include. For some odd reason, I don't know why form templates came over, but I'm not going to include that here. Right? So here's another thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I need to rerun not just the apply, that's obvious, right? Because I want to update the existing site, but I have to rerun the extract to make sure that the new config updates the PNP file, which is used in the apply, right? So let me go ahead and save this, go ahead and hit play. And now it's prompting me to say, hey, you're about to overwrite this PNP file. Are you sure you want to do this? And I want to say, yep, that's my intent. And really, that's all we need to do. So we go ahead and let this thing run its thing. Okay, so now that's done. Let's switch over to the apply. Everything remains the same. Updating an existing site, right? And I've already ran the extract to get an updated full PNP. So we're ready to go here. And now we just simply hit play. Okay, so now that's done. So now what we want to do, let's switch over back to our site, hit refresh. This is site contents of our provision site. And just like that, we have issue tracker, we have team calendar, and we have events. So because we had to specify those documents were already specified, so there was no change there. So now what I want to do, just to make sure, oh, and notice how my site title went away again. That's annoying. But that just goes to show me that there must be something in that config file that I probably need to remove or add to make sure this is persistent. So the other thing I want to do is to go through and click on these links. So for some odd reason, the notebook didn't come over. Project team, project plan, project documents. And I notice how smart the navigation is, right? So on my source site, this URL points to the document library of that template site. And in the newly provisioned site, the link gets updated and is smart enough to point to the relative path within the new site. Very helpful. The same is true with the project notebook, right? Notice that it's pointing to the notebook that got provisioned with that team-based template site. And it's not pointing to the notebook of the project site. Again, very smart. And that takes a lot of iteration and logic, probably a lot of bugs and issue tracking to find these small little nuances that will be very problematic if you had to build something like this on your own. So the issue tracker is pointing to the issue tracker here. Now notice what I did with the issue tracker. If you click new, this is just using the out of the box one. Team calendar, that came over. Now I'm very interested about the team calendar because with the team calendar, I did specify some formatting rules, and I also specified a calculated field. So let's test this out. So I'm going to go to Deshaun and my categories. Yep, see, I got these custom categories here. And that's extremely helpful because, you know, as you sit down with the folks at the PMO, and then, you know, your coalition of project managers, and you guys are defining the project template for all project sites, this stuff is important. So the fact that, you know, those categories came over, that's really, really awesome. And now I'm going to say, okay, I want to take off on the 8th. So I'm going to be off on the 8th through the 13th. And that's going to be time off, and then save that. And it looks like my formatting rules came over. Let me try one more. So if I do new, let's just call this release 1. And this is going to be a sprint. That's going to go from the 14th through the 28th. Category, let's call that sprint, and then hit apply. Yep, that's perfect. So now my format. So again, you spend all that time with these business users to define all these different features and capabilities. Everyone sign off. We're good to go. You package that up in the template, and the provisioning engine carries that forward into all your new provisioned sites. And the last thing I want to test is these articles. So the article came over. Notice how my images came over, my background, abstract background came over. That looks good. I think I clicked on the same one. Oh, they all have this background. Okay. So here's another thing. So if I go new post, okay, so maybe I don't have that. Because the other thing is, what if you have templates created? right? You will want those page templates or those article templates to come over. So let me do this. Let me go ahead and cancel this. Let me go to my main site, my project site. Did I have a template here? So let me do page. No, I didn't have any templates here. So maybe that's something that you can, just practice and confirm that those come over. My guess is it will technically, it should, right? Because templates are just pages, site pages stored in the site pages library under a folder called templates, right? So the fact that we're bringing over site pages and we're persisting all of that within our provisioning, the assumption is that any page templates you have in your template site will be available in the newly created provision site. All right, so I don't think did we scroll down to confirm? So there's the default events, there's the contacts, and then there's a nice countdown. Perfect. This did what we expected to do. So now, in the next video, let's try one more provisioning scenario that's a little bit complex. Maybe it could be looked at as an edge case, right? Let's say, okay, let's put together a client portal site. Let's package that up as a template, adjust our provisioning engine that will copy that client portal site to new provision sites, right? And basically it's going to be a scenario every time we onboard a client. Internally, we may have multiple teams there to support the client, and we're going to use a site strategy that makes the client the tip of the iceberg, right? And then from there, their relative information is going to be provisioned. So a little bit more complex than what we're used to, but again, it could be an edge case. So it's complex and it's not a common scenario, but I think it would be fun to tackle just so that we kind of understand the limits of the provisioning framework. All right, that's it for this video. Until then, I'll see you tomorrow.